All right, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our this meeting of the board policy committee. And we will start with our roll call, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. President Taylor.
I'm here.
Vice President Nicolette.
Good afternoon.
I am here. Trustee Church.
Here with my ACES uniform.
Trustee Mayberry.
Here.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Here.
Trustee Smith.
Trustee Smith may join us later.
Okay,
May join us
I'm
later.
going to say delayed.
Yeah, she may be, and if she does, it'll be on Zoom. So she'll
Okay,
contact me
we
earlier.
have a quorum, Madam President.
All right, thank you very much. And I'm going to just clarify for the record, this is for you, Trustee Church. That's the Reno Aces, not the Las Vegas Aces, the WNBA team that just won the national championship, Las Vegas Aces. I should have worn that jersey, but wanted to just clarify because they're also the Aces, Trustee Church.
So noted, the Reno Aces baseball team, which I believe is the Western Division champion.
Yes, they are. They are, and we're proud. We're certainly proud of them as well. And we're also proud of the Aces. They're our state team, the WNBA Aces. That is the first professional major championship won in the state of Nevada.
Wow. Wow.
Yes,
Pretty cool.
yes,
Go ahead, ladies.
yes. So go girls. That's all that's for, Trustee Church. Go girls. Go girls. All right, let's jump into our agenda. It's lengthy, but it doesn't seem like it's too deep, but we'll see how it goes. Agenda item 2.01 needs to be pulled because we weren't quite ready in time with the minutes. So that will be carried over. That's just the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting in August. So that will be pulled into our next meeting. Thanks, America's working hard to get that done. So thank you very much. Okay, so we'll jump right on to agenda item 2.02. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or for the proposed revision of Board Policy 7700, emergency management, specifically to update formatting, clarify language, and reflect current practice to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees. This is for consideration of preliminary approval. And before us, we have two esteemed gentlemen, and we'll let you introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. Thank you for that impressive introduction. Jason Trevino, Chief of Police for the Washington County School District, and I have with me
Roy Anderson, Emergency Manager.
Okay,
Okay.
sir, whenever you're ready, Chief and Roy.
Yeah, I'm going to let Roy just kind of walk through. This is obviously Roy's wheelhouse, emergency management. So I'm going to let Roy walk through the changes to the policy.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Taylor. Board members, what we're looking at doing is making sure that we are cleaning up the language just to kind of strengthen it and align it more with some of the recent changes to NRS. And that's where you'll see as we start changing some of the terminologies, like from staff to employee, get rid of just some of the information in there that I think Neil called superfluous in one of his notes that was on there, which we agree, right? There's just some items that we don't need to have in there. As we start moving through the definitions, again, this is to clarify and align it with the NRS that does define what a crisis is, what the definition of emergency is. The main part I really wanted to kind of focus on is item number 3 under the definitions when we start looking at what the mission areas of our emergency management department is. And that's when we start looking at the prevention section and kind of clean up the language that was on it before to make it more up to date to what it is that we do. As we start moving through with prevention, then to protection, mitigation, response, and then finally recovery. This information was first introduced in Presidential Directive 8. And then kind of clarified a little bit more in the U.S. Department of Education's the readiness for emergency management in schools and what their terminology they use. So we borrowed some of that terminology and then cleaned it up to make it more aligned with what we do here with the district. When we start moving through some of the policy information that we go through, there's just cleaning up our language so that we have the adoption of the emergency operation plans, where we want to just make sure that that language aligns with the state and best practices as well. So you see a lot of that as we move through the policy here. The information that we're looking at when we start I'm sorry, I got a little, let's see, page 3, here we go. When we start looking at the committee, this is really where I'm asking if we could kind of tighten that language up. NRS does stipulate that the Board of Trustees is the group that obviously assigns the members of the committee. However, with the information that we have for or having an emergency manager allows for the appointment of the emergency manager to be the chair of that committee and then take on the duties where we start looking at ensuring that we have the members as required by NRS, then the meetings are conducted as needed, and then obviously whatever is recommended from that committee for the enhancements or improvements to the emergency operation plan is then implemented and then trained out to the schools. The rest of the information, again, is just kind of cleaning up what some of the information has, what the names of different items are, and then just kind of clarify some of the things that we're doing in regards to state law.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. It looks as though, as I bring it back here to the board, it looks as though the really only thing here of substantive change that we see before us is pertaining to the committee. And that is on starts on page 2. And it's really because we do have a manager to put that responsibility for the manager to ensure that we've staffed it according to statute as opposed to putting it on the Board of Trustees. That looks like the only substantive recommendation here that Mr. Anderson shared with us. So, Dr. Nicolette, we'll go to you.
Yes, thank you. Hi, gentlemen, and thank you for all that you do. I mean, every single moment of every day, because you never know what's going to come across your to-do list. So on page 2E, recovery, I struggled with the consists of 4 areas and I count 5. Did we vet this with Catherine Loudon, psychological and emotional? Are those like clumped into one? So there's really only 4?
That is correct. Those are lumped together. When we're looking at recovery, obviously we have to look at the totality of things. So the emergency plan itself actually does have a psychological recovery component to it, but it also does incorporate that into our recovery piece of the emergency operation plan. So technically it is the 4. So it's the academic, physical, fiscal, and then the psychological and emotional are tied together.
All right, thank you. And then, so I scratched my head a little bit on page 3 there when we start talking about the emergency operations plan template and then the committee. And I wondered, and then I noticed, let me turn to the right page, page 5, we've omitted Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. Can you just help me, and you know that's really near and dear to me, can you just help me understand how the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission and this other committee are going, their roles and how they will be different?
Okay. So when we're looking at the Emergency Operation Development Committee, that's the committee that develops the emergency response plan for the district. It's a committee that is mandated by NRS to contain certain members or have certain members available. So, for example, there's a Board of Trustee. You have to have at least a couple administrators, principals. We look at local emergency responders as far as fire, police, emergency management representatives. You know, and there's a couple parents that are on it as well. We also have the non-licensed employees of the district, so you know, office staff or I think I've had custodians or nurses in the past. We also have had teachers as well. So there's a large group, and then I actually even go above and beyond the numbers that are required from NRS and try to incorporate more from each category as I can. And then that development committee looks at just the emergency operation plan. So they're not looking at overall school safety that the commission would. And then the reason for the removal of the commission from here is that isn't necessarily driven by emergency management. That would be driven by its own policy, and it looks like that was a recommendation from our legal counsel as well. Is that way it would be a separate entity.
Thank you. And that, I'm sorry, let me get the right name. The Emergency Operations Committee, they've been working for a while now, correct?
Yeah, so prior to my arrival here, so I've been in the district 4 years now, and what the committee, if you will, was basically just made up of those individuals. So there wasn't a formal standing committee that I was aware of. So it was convened when necessary. So based on the NRS, I convened those as needed at the beginning of the year. The big change was a few years ago when we went from the version, I think it was the 2018 version, to the 2019 version of what we're doing now of the current emergency operation plan template that the schools use to develop their individual school plans.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That answer those questions, Dr. Nicolette?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Trustee Rodriguez? Oh, I'm sorry, trustee.
no.
He was on there for, I think he's going to move towards the motion, so I think you may, no, okay, go ahead. Oh, please. I thought you were ready to do it. Go ahead, please. Trustee Rodriguez, my bad.
I mean,
My
you
bad.
get paid by the hour.
I got pressure to get out of here in time for Ellen. You pressured me.
Thank you, Madam President. Good questions there, Vice President Nicolette. I think really I just have one. Under C3, employees shall be trained and participate in exercises related to the, we all know that word, of the site emergency operations plan. What does that encompass? Like, and by shall, I like the word because, that obligates them to participate, which I really do appreciate. But so can you kind of go into a little bit more of what that means? What does that look like?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's another one, obviously, is driven by NRS, but it's best practices, right? As a district, we want to ensure that our staff is as prepared for emergency as best as possible. So a lot of that, when we're looking at what does that training incorporate, we're looking at what I provide for the administrators to use to the employees. So I've developed a training video that walks through like why emergency management and why emergency planning, kind of walk through what the response looks like, and then walks through what our what we call functional annexes, which is our response options. What does the code yellow look like? What does code red, et cetera. So the employees have access to that video. It's a video that's on board. It's a part of the onboard process. So anybody that's hired gets to watch that video. It's also available through the new emergency operations team that I've created for every school. So if they give access to their staff, if the school gives access to their staff, then they have access to that video. There's also things that we're doing for like med sleds. Those are devices that we help evacuate people from our second and third stories, or even some of our basements, if we think of like Vaughn Middle School, to evacuate the building if necessary. So we have that training involved. Bleeding control is something that we're starting. So we're actually really starting to incorporate some more training videos, and those are things that as part of that process. The other part of that training would be then also what each individual principal feels is necessary for their building level, because obviously we have an overall emergency operation plan. However, each individual school is unique, and I always encourage our administrators to take whatever I provide as a basic or baseline for their training, and then incorporate what is needed into their specific schools. And then on top of that, and I'll stop, I promise, on top of that would be the drills, and then our drills would incorporate training. And if the drills are done correctly and not just a compliance piece, it would be a learning opportunity, and then we can develop any type of after action or improvements that would be based upon what the lessons that were learned during those drills.
Okay, and awesome. I really appreciate that. Now, what do we as a school district, because I feel like this is kind of all on the same page, emergency management, what in local agreements or what do we do with the rest of Washoe County, their DEM, state? Like, is there anything that, do we work with them? I haven't.
So as a true emergency management fashion, you always rely and work with your partners.
Right.
So for example, we are a voting member of the Inter-Hospital Coordination Council, and a representative, myself and a representative from Student Health Services sits on that committee. just last Friday, I participated in a alternate regional emergency operations center training, brought all the partners together so we can kind of tabletop what would happen if there was a certain type of incident that occurred. Definitely work with our local responders quite frequently, not only with the development of the plan, but also some other things that we do as far as, trying to develop the trainings that we do develop, how that would look and incorporate with our local responders.
Okay. Now I want to kind of narrow it down because I know a lot of things that are on a lot of parents' minds is how safe are our schools. We're all thinking, oh, I'm active shooter. What do we do with our neighboring agencies training with that? Like, because I really like this shall. I mean, we're just going to hold our feet to it. I really like it. So what do we do with them?
So, great question, Trustee Rodriguez. So we do have great partnership with Washoe, Reno, and Sparks, as well as the myriad of other agencies in our valley, NHP, the tribal agencies. A great example I could tell you. So we all work together. The major agencies worked together a couple years ago, and which we were a part of. Myself, Deputy Chief Price was a part of it. We all had some mini meetings, got a lot of different minds in the room over the course of several months to come up with a regional active assailant response plan. We don't even call it active shooter because it's just an active assailant. It could be somebody with knives, bats, whatever, axes. It doesn't matter. Sight and sound of violence is what we're responding to in whatever fashion that may be. So we work together to come up with a regional response so that when an incident were to happen, whether it's at one of our schools or the mall or the hospital, everybody that's responding is operating on the same sheet of music. We train to the same standard, which is great because we don't have to be in the same room learning how Reno does something, but we don't do it that way. But Sparks does it this way and County does it that way. We all are responding to this plan, and it really broke it down into some very simple terms. Simple things such as we don't use north, south, east, and west. We number the building 1, 2, 3, 4 side. Number one side is the front doors. Doesn't matter what building it is. The front doors are the number one side. Because under stress, you don't want to be worried about the southeast corner of the north parking lot by the south baseball field. You get lost really quickly and stuff like that. But that's the kind of language, you're familiar with it. That's the kind of language that would come out over the radio and people get confused very quickly, especially if they're not familiar with the properties. So we simplified things down to that. We came up with a very quick and easy system to secure the outer perimeter as well as an inner perimeter, and then assemble quick response teams of whoever's there. So it doesn't matter, and I can give you a great example. As you guys are well aware, we had a lockdown last week. Thankfully, school was out. So, but I watched the entire thing from my office on video from start to finish, and it was beautiful coordination of a myriad of agencies coming together that quickly, forming teams, and searching that school. And it went off flawlessly. Everyone performed great. And we had a team that had 2 deputies, a school police officer, and a trooper. There was another team that had someone from alternative sentencing unit, a trooper, a deputy, and a school police officer. And everybody worked together great hand in hand. So long answer, but yes, we all trained to the same standard for that active assailant response. And as witnessed by last week, when that call goes out, everybody comes.
Outstanding, and I'm pretty aware of that. How often do we train? Like, how often do we get with other agencies and actually do those drills, like during the summertime or something like that? Is there something in place that you guys get together and train?
So there's not a formalized schedule of getting together to train, and all the agencies are kind of on their own training schedules. Ours is very unique because of contract requirements as well as keeping people on the beat during school time. Our training hours are very focused to our breaks, or actually summer break per the contract actually. So it really limits the time that our folks can train, and we can't pull off 5, 6 officers to go train on a Tuesday when it's a school day, because then we're taking resources away from our schools. So that's why it was really important to come up with that regionalized plan that we're all training to that standard. That way when we have an incident, we know how each other is going to respond to it, even though we're not physically training with each other all the time. When there are those opportunities to train together, we do, and there's a lot of times where we'll send 1 or 2 of our trainers to a training with like Reno or Sparks or Washoe so that they can kind of integrate with them, and then they'll bring it back, and then when we do our training, they'll be like, hey, just work with county. This is kind of a new technique that they're doing now, or this is something that Reno's doing now. And then on top of that, we help to facilitate them utilizing our schools as much as possible to train. And Reno PD is utilizing the old HUG building to do like 2 days of training, I believe. Really intensive training utilizing that building that they normally wouldn't get to utilize to get some experience in there with the Obviously, the school layout's gonna be different, but actually being in that environment. And that's one of the things that we've really tried to teach the other agencies over the last 10 years for sure, is that the school environment is a lot different than they think it's going to be when they enter it, whether there's kids in it or not. People think that, oh, you could hear a gunshot in the back of this school from the front of the school. I'm here to tell you, you can't. Things like that that are just assumed. But once we put them in those environments and they're able to hear, like, oh, you can't even hear this window being broken at the end of the hallway because there's, so much space in there. So it's a good opportunity for them to get in that building.
I also would like to point out is not only law enforcement is utilizing the old HUG building, but we also have our fire partners as well that are in there, testing how to break through doors and whatever else that they need to test.
All right, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Wow, that's good stuff. Good questions. Good questions. Trustee Church and then Clerk Manetto.
Great questions. I kind of want to piggyback on a little bit of that. Number one, I don't see the word superintendent in here except one time. It seems to take away all the authority from the superintendent to do anything. Is that on purpose? And maybe piggybacking on that, almost every policy will say the superintendent will develop regulations that piggyback on the policy. This is so when I first read this, I said, this is very important to me. And then I read it and I go, it's very generic. It really doesn't provide guidance too much. It's very 30,000 foot. Nowhere in here does it say that the superintendent will develop regulations. So can you comment? Is that an oversight or is that on purpose or?
I would say it was neither an oversight or on purpose. It was just in reviewing it, a lot of the emergency management pieces are dictated by Nevada revised statute that the superintendent can't override or change. And that was more our understanding of the board policy was that higher level ensuring that those needs were met. And then at the district level, that's something that Roy and I have talked about quite a bit, and obviously we have a brand new superintendent, so those are conversations that we would love to have with her in the future. But there are things at the superintendent's level that could be implemented as far as requirements when it comes to emergency management that would be outside of these Nevada revised statute requirements that the board had the general oversight over. But obviously, if there's a gap somewhere, then we're happy to address that.
Then, so perhaps, are you recommending the addition of that, Trustee Church?
Well, I wanted to hear the answer first. Maybe there was a specific reason, but it seems like it wouldn't hurt to put in there at least maybe the word may. The superintendent may develop regulations. And I don't know if the superintendent has an opinion, but just normally we do that. And again, as what I just heard was there's no reason not to.
But would you like to make that a motion?
Okay, and I wouldn't know. I put it somewhere at the end as I don't know how to phrase it, but
It's typically at the end.
yeah, I'd make a motion that a sentence be added that the superintendent may develop regulations administrative regulations to facilitate the implementation of this policy. And I do emphasize the word may because then it's not required.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor, and council is including this there, and there will be our typical language.
Right.
That's generally thrown in there for that. That be included towards the end of this policy. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion on the floor and there's a second. Further discussion? Dr. Nicolette?
Yes, I think I made an assumption that, and thank you for that motion. So the emergency operations plan, not the template, but the actual plan, does the superintendent and any authority exist in that plan? And the reason I ask this is because I know this is a policy. It is a 30,000 foot view. And when we talk about emergency management, there are certain things you don't want a lot of people to know. And that's good. That's good emergency management planning. So in that operations plan, does it reference the superintendent?
Yeah, so in standard emergency management practices, there's what's called the policy group. So the policy group would be, for our purposes, would be the superintendent, deputy superintendent, and district leadership in working with the board of trustees to set the direction of whatever the incident requires, whatever that would look like. So just make it real quick and simple and easy. If we think about school closure for snow or smoke, but when we look at that, that would be something that the policy group would make that recommendation, and the decision would ultimately it be the superintendent's decision for those types of things. So while the board policy doesn't specify that, the emergency operation plan does, and then that information then is, actually all throughout the plan itself.
Further discussion on including that part, just as mentioned before, that the superintendent may develop administrative regulations in support of or to execute. Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? The motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous, which is 6-0. Please, Trustee Church, you have more questions?
Yeah, no. Again, this is very sensitive stuff, and this is, some of it has to be by law, public information, but we've had discussions in the past, say, on who can carry a gun on campus. Is that found in a regulation, or do we know? Would that be a regulation under this policy, or would that be something else we should?
There's state law that dictates that, although we do know, I don't think it's emergency, either way, I don't think it's emergency operations. I think it's generally who gets to carry a gun, right?
It's not the state law delegates to the superintendent certain authority.
Yeah, the state law around it, but the superintendent does have some, but it's not here, and it's not an
It wouldn't
emergency.
be under this.
Right.
Okay, then
Okay.
I won't go there because it's
Okay.
not on the agenda. And then finally, the word shall, I agree, it's important. There's a lot of shells in there, like shall under committee number 2. Shall follow the template, that would be committee 2. It's in there somewhere where it says will follow the template. Where did I lose that?
B, 2B?
B, yes.
Is that where it is?
Yes. The emergency response plan template shall be used.
So-
What if we change that term, or what if we change what if we change it to a countywide emergency? Do you want the word shall? Do you feel that's good? I mean, I don't.
That language is actually directly from NRS.
Okay.
When we're looking at the NRS for our emergency operations plan, there is also a caveat that they being the schools, could seek permission from the committee to deviate from the plan. So that is in there. I haven't seen it in my 16 years of doing emergency planning at schools, but it is in there. An example where that might come into play would be, say, Gerlach, because of their size and some of the uniqueness of their population and just where they are geographically, their plan doesn't necessarily, might not necessarily follow the template. But I will tell you that working with Gerlach, a lot of the changes that we were looking at making for Gerlach, we actually made for the rest of the district.
Okay,
as well.
but then that kind of makes my point.
Yeah.
If it doesn't follow it district-wide like Gerlach, should we maybe change it to generally shall? I mean, I just hate to lock somebody in, have somebody go, oh, no, Gerlach has to do it. I'm probably being semantic, but maybe we should say generally shall?
I was going to say, my concern on this is the fact that, we don't have a lot of hard shalls when it comes to emergency management. And my concern is if we eliminate it, then that could be interpreted by the principal to say, I don't have to do this. And if you have a principal that's not on board with the requirements, by taking out the shall, I think we potentially would open our door to say, we told them they didn't have to follow it, when in fact we want them to follow it. Versus what Roy's saying is the NRS does allow for an exemption if they ask for it, i.e. Gerlach. Because of their things, we can go outside of the template on a one-on-one, but still hold everyone else accountable to the shall, is where I would.
But this says at all district facilities. Shall be used at all district facilities. So you're telling me that's technically, there's exceptions. As well as, we're talking schools. Facilities could be the bus station and an employee, disgruntled employee, or the nutrition services.
All of that is included, and yeah. it sounds as though what you're looking for, and don't let me put words in your mouth, Trustee Church, okay? It sounds as though what you're looking for, it may be everyone shall follow this, because Chief, I hear what you're saying. You don't want there to be flexibility in there unless exempted by the by NRS.
How about a motion for that? I could.
Oh, I'm not trying to make a motion. I'm just
No.
trying to get us not stuck in this thing. But it's because what Chief is saying is that we need people to know that you have got to adhere to this. And then there's that caveat, should there be an exception. So that might be a route you might want to go, Trustee Church.
I could make a motion to that.
Okay, please, sir.
So
Motion?
after the word district facilities, so it shall be used at all district facilities, probably a comma, unless an exemption has been granted, comma.
Does that covers your concern, Chief?
That's my motion.
Ms. Anderson? Okay, there's a motion on the floor that an exception be included as allowable by statute. Is there a second to that motion?
Where do we want to put it in? I'm sorry.
Or you go again and tell
This would
council
be
you
under
like it?
B, and it says the template shall be used at all district facilities and shall contain specific elements. I would recommend after the word at all district facilities, comma, unless an exemption has been granted, comma, and then followed by and shall contain specific elements.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second? I think people, is there? It seems like there's still some, okay. Not there, Trustee Church. So let's move on to your next one.
And then finally, you use under that same section, number I, you use the word monthly drills. Is that NRS? Do we want to lock ourselves into monthly versus weekly or quarterly?
So NRS does specify, well, actually, International Fire Code does stipulate that an occupied school has to have a fire drill every month that they're occupied. That is a requirement by fire code. And then also there is a NRS that does require more drills on top of that. So technically there are some months where we have to do 2 drills a month. So leaving that language in of at least 1 per month would help satisfy NRS. Yes.
So we blame Joe. Then is that what I'm hearing? Yeah, Trustee Church. Yes.
No, I'm just confused. So there are some that require more than monthly.
Yes. So by leaving it as of at least monthly drills. So for example, October is our earthquake drill. And because there's an evacuation portion of that, we only do the earthquake drill for the month of October. So having any language that would, say you have to do more could confuse some items, and that's why we left it at monthly.
You don't have the word at least monthly, it just says monthly.
Yeah.
Do you recommend adding the words at least?
Yeah. I don't see.
I don't, maybe General Counsel can help. So I don't know that would be necessary when we know per NRS we have to do the monthly. So it's stated as monthly. So the at least is not really relevant because you're already mandated to do it monthly.
But didn't you say there's some that mandate more than monthly?
No, there's some that they do on top of monthly. So it's like so we have the monthly ones as mandated by statute. But sometimes some months there are additional ones, which means it would be more than that. But for October, there's going to be more than this one, because your concern was, man, maybe we got to get to monthly. And Mr. Anderson is saying, well, that's pretty easy because in many months there is actually an additional training that happens that could make sure we meet that qualification if something else kind of weird happens.
Yeah, so the way the schedule works out, there's about 16 drills a year per school.
Okay, and then I just noticed it doesn't say fire drills. It says monthly drills, blah, 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 evacuation, earthquake, or lockdown. I mean, I'm comfortable if you want to say monthly, but you're the experts. But and by the way, I've heard you speak before, and you're funny and excellent at the same time.
So we'll answer that and look at it. So when we don't say fire drill. The evacuation does cover that, because I kind of do it as like what an educator would, where not all evacuations are fire drills, but all fire drills are evacuations. So leaving it as an evacuation drill allows us for a little leeway if a school would like to do a evacuation to simulate a gas leak or some other need. So that way they don't necessarily have to pull the fire alarm every month. So leave it a little general like that. Also, part of materials that go to the school is a drill guide, and in that drill guide I have a suggested drill schedule, and that lists out what months should have which drills. So having it in here, wouldn't allow us to have some of the flexibility that if we say monthly, that if we do have the ability to reduce some of our drills, then we're able to get those reduced.
Okay. That cover it? Okay. Clerk Manetto, and then looking over here, we have Dr. Nicolette. You had something after Clerk Manetto?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. As a person who has been in Code Red's both drills and real ones, I have to testify that, Chief, you're absolutely right. The police get there that fast. It is amazing how quickly the whole community of our people who protect us and take care of us get there and do their thing. And the drills are so very important because we have to know what to do, the kids have to know what to do. Even though the Code Red drills are kind of scary, but a Code Red is scarier. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Manetto. Vice President Nicolette?
I just want to say that there is a reference to what my colleague is talking about, and I do get it. I like the thorough nature of a policy. To be, the final statement is, but not necessarily limited to. I think that keeps it open to new practice and needs. So I do think it's covered, and it might meet your needs, Trustee.
Okay. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. Yeah, I agree with the chief and emergency manager. I'm really, from my perspective, I'm not interested in wordsmithing this anymore. I think we need to keep some flexibility open. I think it reads fine. I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, please. Go ahead, Trustee.
Move to approve policy 7700.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor. There is a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? All right, the motion is carried. That motion moves forward with the change that we made earlier. On to agenda. Thank you so much. Thank you for doing what you do to keep our kids safe, our teachers safe, our schools safe.
Thank you.
Especially nowadays. All right, 2.03, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of, this is Board Policy 7610, Public Records Request, to clarify language, remove redundancies to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees. This will be presented by Chief General Counsel Rombardo.
Good afternoon, everyone. So let's start at the top. So we just made really minor edits throughout. The purpose statement was slightly modified just to be more concise, change the definition in D, copies of public records, including, and we just did that to make it plural, which made more sense throughout the policy. And then we also made us, we decided to put education records in there because they are different. They're not public records. So we thought it was necessary to make that as an example. And really beyond that, yeah, I feel really good about the policy. I think it's great. I will share anecdotally that people from throughout the state, from other school districts, have been using our policy. And in fact, I just was on a big meeting with 5 other districts, and they all reference our policy. So it's in good shape. Our regulation's good. These really are just kind of minor changes, but as you know, we have to bring them to you. So I don't really have anything else to add. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but we're looking for approval.
Okay. Thank you, Counsel. Bring it here to the board. Questions, comments for Counsel on these updates? Okay, seeing none, looking for a motion if it's the pleasure of the board. So, got you, Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Second. Okay. What's second, Dr. Nicolette? No further discussion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? Right, the motion carries. Let the record show 7610 moves forward. Now on to agenda item 2.04. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 7620, records management, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. And this is being presented by our very own Dr. Enfield.
My first policy
Your
assignment.
first policy assignment.
So I want to thank Neil and America for their help with this. So 7620 is records management. Am I on the right one? Want to make sure.
Yes,
And again, purpose here primarily was to clarify language, remove language that should be in regulation. And so the one thing that as we go through it, and I'll let you go through it and let us know if you have specific questions. There was nothing hugely significant. However, I did find a typo. Once an English teacher, always an English teacher.
That's on me.
Or maybe I'm reading it incorrectly. On
where you at?
I am on under policy 3. The board hereby directs the superintendent to adopt not and administrative regulation. Is that right?
And administrative regulation.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, it is not
All
a
right.
conjunction.
And I
Yep.
apologize for not, and by the way, no judgment. I do typos myself. I'm sorry that I should have caught that before and let you know, but that was the only other thing that I wanted to point out. I'll open it up to the trustees for discussion.
If I may,
Yes, we're open for discussion. Yes,
I
Dr.
will
Nicolette.
piggyback on a correction, and I may be reading it wrong too. It happens, right? You start getting cross-eyed with this stuff. Under definitions, number 3,
Definitions number 3. Hold up, let me get up there. Yes.
is a list of records and the appropriate time limits that they must be kept for before. Maybe we don't need 4. Kept before. It is just a suggestion.
Yeah. Right. I think we're, yes, I think typos we don't need to vote on. Those are just typos.
Just typos. We're all human.
Yes, those are just typos. For before, that's old English. For before.
That's right.
I just want to point out nothing changed there, so that's been in there for years.
Okay. let the record reflect that that's a long-standing typo.
Can I just say, President, as I said, we're a district on the rise, so we're
Yes.
we're cleaning up
we're
our
leveling
time.
up now. See, that used to be okay. We don't do that anymore. It used to be okay. Any other grammatical or typo errors that we'd like to make at this time? Actually, they aren't grammatical. They're all any other typos? All right, seeing none, now we'll move on to the actual policy. The contents. Any discussion? Okay, they seem pretty much minor.
Most of these were, as Neil will say, were for regulation, so that was the biggest shift.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so looking for a motion if it is the pleasure of my colleagues. Moved by Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Second, Trustee Mayberry. You gotta be a little earlier, a little faster. Ellen, you got beat twice now. All right, there's a motion on the floor for approval. Board Policy 7620. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition? Right, the motion carries. Let the record show that it is unanimous. Okay, we'll move on to 2.05, discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9088, trustee/superintendent relations, to revise language related to individual members of the Board of Trustees to a future member of the board meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And this is back to Chief Counsel Rombardo.
Thank you again, President Taylor and Superintendent Enfield. Good afternoon, everyone. This Board Policy 9088, as the superintendent just said, a lot of cleanup. I guess I will point out, and I hope the trustees appreciate this, in the past, you were referred to as members of the board. I just never liked that, so I did change it to trustees. You're elected officials, and you should be recognized as such. And so that's a big part of what we did in here is took trustee and put it in there instead of members of the board. And we'll try to catch that everywhere we can. But really, that's it.
Yes, I was going to say, I didn't see anything else.
This is so not substantial. And as you all probably recall, we just basically redid this one Well,
It
2 years
was-
ago.
yeah,
I
it was-
guess
it was
now,
relatively
but
recent.
yeah,
It was-
but relatively recent.
Yep.
So.
Almost 2 years. Yep, it was pretty close, John.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
That's
It's
right.
crazy.
We did all the 9,000s.
Yep.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So we're back to the 9,000s, and just as a side note, we're almost done going through all the policies, and thanks to America for. She's been
Thank you,
awesome.
America. All right. Please, I've asked for zero public comment on these, so please let me know if we do that and I've missed any.
We have not had any public comment.
Okay, thank you very much, and I apologize for we haven't missed any. It's all good. All right, you usually catch that, Trustee Church. You're
I
slipping.
usually do,
You're
yeah.
slipping. You're slipping. Yes, sir. Your lights on?
I'm actually reading ahead. Yeah, you caught me. This is actually not quite as simple, and I did have discussion with the superintendent, so not blindsiding her. It's something we have talked about. We have a new superintendent who has her own way of doing things, and in many cases, a simple request from a admin person, based on, I don't want to put words in her mouth, so she's there to correct me, is not unacceptable to her. So maybe I can turn it over to you and Dr. Enfield and let you kind of explain what we talked about. But
So Trustee Church, are you referring to expectations around trustee communication with staff?
so example, if I say, oh, can I get a copy of our stats on SBAC for 2021, then I don't have to go through the superintendent.
Sorry, do you want to say something?
No, please. I don't, is that a question to me? Is that a question to? I'm sorry.
It's for the superintendent and I talked about it. So for example, it's basically under 1B, and it talks about how you have to basically go through the superintendent for everything. And I've asked the superintendent her opinion on that, and rather than be inundated with, hey, may I get this simple report, she feels comfortable, I think, if I just go out, if I just say, Dr. Keogh, do you have that study?
On whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Superintendent?
I'd actually like to ask Mr. Lombardo to weigh in, and then I'll happily respond.
Yeah, and I don't think this policy prohibits that. I appreciate your point of view, but what Superintendent Enfield can do is simply say to you, you're more than welcome to go pursue it, right? So this says you have to come to me because I want to know what my trustees are doing. But if she tells you ahead of time, I don't care if you come to me, then that's fine. That's up to her to decide as management.
But I do care.
Right.
Obviously. I would never say that.
course,
So let me just provide some clarification. Then let me know, Trustee Church, if this reflects our conversation, if this answers the question. And I'd also ask other trustees to weigh in as well if you find this to be problematic. My practice has always been that I ask that trustees come to me and or the appropriate person on ELT. In my former district, it was cabinet, right, senior level. And the reason for that is not that I don't trust trustees to go talk to anyone, but it puts staff in a very difficult position, knowing that I'm technically their boss, but you're also the bosses as well, right? So it puts someone in a tough spot if a trustee comes and says, I'd like you to do this, and the director or whomever it is like, I don't know what to do, it's a trustee, but, whereas executive leadership team, I trust them. They can run interference with the appropriate staff member, and they're also very good at keeping me in the loop as well. So that's the practice. I don't know that this policy precludes that.
If I may add just a little
Please.
context from whenever this was established or updated or whatever, I believe part of the guardrail, so to speak, that
Yeah.
this is intended to have is so that me as a trustee, I'm not inundating this particular staff member with a whole bunch of stuff that I need
Right.
because I'm looking for something and it may be district related, don't get me wrong, but then this employee, this staff member, they already have a bunch of stuff to do and I'm asking for a ton of things and so on. And it really does put the employee in a difficult situation. The intention is to kind of put some guardrails around, because sometimes as trustees, and I think we've all been here, we get on something is really important to us, and we really want to and it's well intended. It's not because anyone's trying to do anything, right? It's well intended. It's really important to us, and I want to get this, and I want to have it and then this poor staff member. No, they're trying to scramble. They're in the middle of something. They have another assignment or an emergency, but as a trustee, certainly that puts them in a tough spot. So the intention behind that was to help eliminate that. But as council has said, there has been, a practice that I have used is, if it's something as simple as, let's just say a copy, because I think that's not that I need you to create a report, because that's what this is more intended to, for those types of things, and I'm asking a staff member to do all kinds of stuff, and I need it tomorrow, and think about our positions that we're in, that puts a lot of stress and really puts an employee in a difficult position. Is that if I'm going to request, let's just say a copy, I'm going to ask Ms. Anderson for a copy of something they put out, whatever the case may be. I might email her, but I'm going to copy the superintendent. Because that way I've asked, and that way something as simple as a copy, it doesn't inundate her. All she does is sees it. But if there's some reason why that shouldn't happen, or because she knows that she's giving Miss Anderson, maybe they have a personnel situation. No, you don't. But maybe they have a personnel situation going on that I would not know anything about, which would make that inappropriate. It allows the superintendent to get to me and say, hey, here's the deal. I wouldn't know about that stuff. But if it's just noise, because it's just a copy, she sees it, it's gone, and so that's the way I've dealt with that in the past. On very simple things, yes. Please,
I think
Counsel.
that context is really important, and also if you read 1B closely, this is, in President Taylor and I think we're the only two here at this time, because it was right when I came on, is what we had trustees who were pursuing issues that were important to them, which is great, as President Taylor said, but it was also shutting down whole offices because they were spending the entire time trying to get these fulfilled. So what this actually says is, if the superintendent, in her opinion, see where it says in the superintendent's opinion, so in her opinion, if she says, we've already provided this, or this is too much, this exceeds, you're going to shut down my office, then it basically says you got to go back and get a vote of the board. So this isn't for your day-to-day stuff. This is for a big request, creating a new report or something that will literally, in that case, if you recall, it was literally crushing particular offices, the requests that were coming in, where they couldn't get their day-to-day job done because they were just doing this work. So that was the intent behind it.
And clearly I understand that. However, if you read 2BI, it's pretty clear that we don't do it. We can't do it. It's pretty handcuffing to us as a trustee that I can't go to Miss Anderson and say, hey, and I actually did this a couple weeks ago or a week ago. I said, hey, this is from 2016 and I can't find the press release. And she responded right away. And what I think I just heard the superintendent say was or. In other words, we really don't have to CC her so that she opens an email just to see that it's me asking Michelle for a copy of an old report. So when you read it says when a trustee requests report information assistance, I mean, that's pretty specific. Without explicit superintendent approval, the employee is directed to report the request immediately to the superintendent. And that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about being able to do that to the ELT.
Well, I hear what you're saying. You're right. 'Cause what may be practice or maybe a preference or comfort level with the superintendent, and even probably beyond when we got through this period of time, it wasn't as big of an issue. And you may have been in and out during some of that time as well, Diane, when that was happening. And so this should be updated to reflect better of that. I would just, as one trustee, I do think it's still important to copy the superintendent because, as I just explained it, ELT or otherwise, I don't think we should be emailing other than ELT anyway, quite rarely, because again, that puts employees in a difficult situation. ELT, they're used to coming here. We talk to them about things. They're used to reporting. If you're down the line a little bit, it's really intimidating when the trustee reaches out to you. Yeah. And I just want us to be able to be mindful. We're just us, right? But it's really intimidating for them. And I think we should be mindful of that. But I think in any case, right, if we're reaching out because an area superintendent is doing something, work, whatever, I do think it's appropriate to, I would prefer, so we don't get back to where we were before, just continue to copy the superintendent. And then if additional information needs to occur, at least that's already built in. It's not a new thing. Counsel?
Right. And so this actually reaffirms exactly what Superintendent Enfield said. Is she's letting you know right now, and I'm sure she'll send an email communication to ELT, that ELT may communicate with you and you may communicate with them, and she may have expectations on, for example, you all know if you email me, she's getting looped in, whether you're on there or not. That's just what I do. But This actually does exactly what you're asking, and what it does is it actually protects the employee. It gives relief to the employee because the employee has the opportunity to say, I'm not sure if I should respond, so I need to go to the superintendent.
But it does not preclude
Right.
a simple transactional request, like you going to Michelle and saying, can you pull up this press release? I operate from a place of trust and professionalism. Trust and professionalism with my team, trust and professionalism with my trustees, and I trust in people's professional judgment to know. And for the most part, my team is very good about copying me, but I also, in a quick instance like that, of course I would not say that you would have to. Am I being clear on that?
Yeah, I think what we're hearing from the superintendent, if I may, is BI says, if you go directly to an employee, okay, and it hasn't gone through, not just copy the super, but it hasn't gone through, then the employee's going to make sure the superintendent knows and says, okay, great. Or if there's an issue, the superintendent's going to reach out to that board member. So this I does not preclude us from going to that employee. I says you can go to that employee, but just know that employee is just going to loop in the superintendent.
Respectfully, that's not what it says. It says at the end, and not follow through with such request until directed to do so by the superintendent.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, but I mean, it's, so I can't just write Michelle and say, can I get a copy of that 2016 press release? I have to go to the superintendent and ask the superintendent for permission, because Michelle was directed by this to say, no, you can't. I have to get permission first.
Well, let me say this, and then what will probably happen is either it's simple enough because they've already had direction from their superintendent in their ELT meetings. This is how you handle stuff like that. That's for them. Or she's not going to say no, trustee Church. She's just going to ask the superintendent.
Well, let me ask one question. What by definition, what is the ELT? Who are we talking
That's
about?
their let me just. It's the direct reports to the superintendent.
Which would.
So that we shared the org charts with you, I believe, it was several weeks ago. So I'm going to do my best to get it all right. So it's the deputy superintendent, chief communications officer, legal counsel, chief of strategies, chief financial officer, chief human resources officer, chief accountability officer,
Deputy.
chief of police. So anyone with a chief in their title, except for the deputy. How's that?
That's what I thought was anyone with a chief.
Oh, well, the ELT, I was thinking chief doesn't show up.
But he's a direct report. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is what I would say. If you have a motion, let's hear it, right? And then otherwise, we have some other lights of other people that want to weigh in.
I'll back off for now and let everybody.
Okay, let's see. We hear what others have
Yeah.
to say. Okay, I saw this side first, so we'll go with Trustee Rodriguez, Clerk Manetto, you're still in, and then Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just echo. I was going to say, like, my time here with the previous administration and the current, I've never had an issue shooting a text or an email and usually getting a response within, I think the most was half an hour.
Maybe.
So, I mean, I get the spirit of this policy. I understand that there was history and there's a reason why there's this policy. Usually more often than not when there's a policy, there's a reason why. And I get the intent of this, but I was just going to say, in my experience here, I've never had an issue getting an answer. So I just want to say that on the record.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez. Clerk Manetto? You did. It can be off if you want, but.
Thank you, Madam President. I, as you said, Madam President, I have always just CC'd the superintendent so she knows what I'm doing at all times.
Thank you, Clerk Manetto. Trustee Mayberry?
Well, I guess what I would say is, the superintendent made a comment, she operates from a position of, what'd you say, trust and honesty. I mean, I don't think you can put those kinds of words into a policy.
Right.
And, not everything is black and white. Clearly, if there's something that's going to take an exorbitant amount of time, how do you define exorbitant? Is it an hour or 5 hours? I mean, frankly, it's a moot point to me. I mean, I'm very comfortable with this. I'm very comfortable with when I request items from the superintendent. If I can, told her last week I have a question on the tutoring program. Was able to talk to Joe Ernst. I try to, and so it's that trust, it's that openness that I appreciate. So I don't want to wordsmith this, as I said in the first one, any further. This is a policy. It's a high level. This is the what. It's not the how, it's not the detail. So oftentimes I think these policy committee meetings are a little bit, we begin to wordsmith things and we spend too much time on high level policies where the how is put in, through the administrative regulations. So I'm comfortable with how this reads. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. Trustee Church, you want me to come back to you, sir?
Yeah, and it's by the way, it's also almost the exact same wording as found under Section 2A, where it says the trustees shall not request reports or information from persons. What I'm hearing, I feel like I'm either in the twilight zone or I misunderstand. I agree with everything the fellow trustees are saying, but it's contrary to the policy. The policy says we don't do that. I can't go to Michelle. I can't go to the chief Trevino. I almost said Soto from Reno PD. Chief Trevino. I can't go to Dr. Parks without permission, not just a CC, without permission. And we're going to be voting on a policy that's contrary to what the superintendent just said that we can. I'm in the twilight zone. Maybe it's me. I just don't understand.
I don't know that I already said my other part. I don't need to repeat it. I see that a little differently, but we'll go. Trustee Rodriguez?
Well, I think this is where we as a board, we actually have two employees. So we have a superintendent and then we have our auditors.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the way I see this is that we go to our employee to carry out whatever it is we need him or her to carry out. That's how I see this.
Please, counsel.
Just for the record and to make it clear, so let's start at B1, so subparagraph I. In cases where a trustee requests reports, information, assistance, or employee action without explicit superintendent approval, you now have on the record explicit superintendent approval to go to ELT for these items. She just told you that. I'm sure she'll send you an email. So if you choose, however, to go to somebody else, you don't have that explicit approval, and it is only at that point that this policy would kick in. This policy, and again, a stopgap to protect that employee. So this is, if you guys were to go straight to America, she may not know what to do, just by way of example, America. So,
She just said I wouldn't. She just said I wouldn't.
So she would probably come to me, and then I would say to the superintendent, how would you like me to proceed? They didn't come straight to me. So you haven't received that explicit approval, but you have received explicit approval to go to ELT members. And so the policy fits. I just want to create the record that the policy fits perfectly, and it's important to create this record, and I respect that Trustee Church disagrees, but it's important because people are evaluated on these policies, and the superintendent is following this policy, and you should evaluate yourselves on this policy, and at least, so if you adopt it, you should know that you are following this policy. That's part of board evaluation that Dr. Osbury talks about and superintendent evaluation. So I am giving you the legal opinion that this language fits exactly as Trustee Mayberry expressed and Superintendent Enfield and President Taylor, all due respect. But you have explicit approval to go to us. So I just respectfully disagree with your analysis.
Okay, we're back here. Is there a motion on the floor? And if not, we'll move, in terms of, I'm looking at for you, Trustee Church, no? Okay. Okay, so we're still on this policy. Any other questions, comments, anything? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion, if it is the pleasure of the board, to approve this policy as submitted.
I'll approve Board Policy 9100.
Okay, thank you.
Correction, that was the wrong policy. My
No, it is. It's 9088.
Approve Board Policy 9088.
Okay. All right. Thank you. There is a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second. We'll go with Clerk Pinello this time. There's a second. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition?
I'm going to be an A.
Okay. Let the record show the motion carries 5-1. Then this will move forward. Now we'll go to agenda item 2.06. That's 9100, Trustee Mayberry. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9100. This is public bodies to revise language, update definitions, and update definitions to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And once again, Chief Counsel is before us.
Great, thank you again. Quickly, 9100, we just basically took the definition of good standing and moved it to the definition section. I don't know how that was misplaced, but it was. Cleaned up a little language. I don't really have a lot to add here. I will point out that 9100 was an ombudsman policy to related to how we do public bodies and how we appoint people to public bodies and how we create public bodies and those type of things. And the reason why we needed it is because in the past we had set out to create a specific set of rules for every single public body. I think we have 14 of them, and my team cannot keep up with 14 sets of rules. And so we have one set of rules. This is how we do it. This was Trustee Cottle sought to get this done along with President Taylor. And the reason why we did it was because there are folks who want to re-up on their public bodies, but there was no mechanism to really do that. We just kind of did it. And then we also created an application policy when a position really did open up. And so we really worked hard on capturing everything in this policy for our public bodies. Beyond that, the changes are minor. I don't have anything else to add. I just thought maybe some context would help. And so we're looking for approval.
Okay, thank you, Counsel. We'll bring it here for discussion. Questions? Okay, Trustee Church?
I guess it's me again. I'll try to be very brief. It's extremely well written. It's, I get it, and I completely 100% disagree with the policy. The policy basically says
With the whole policy?
Pardon? Yes.
With the whole, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the entire intent of the policy I totally disagree with.
Okay.
And I'll summarize my interpretation. The policy basically says when you have an opening on what's commonly called a committee, that the staff does an analysis of applicants, narrows it down to one. It comes back to us. Historically, that generally is under consent. And then the board votes to approve it, and they become on the committee. It also says they can serve 2-year terms, 5 consecutive years. That's 10 years with no competition, because it says they can automatically be reappointed. And that's section, I think it's 8B. But again, it's not I want to get into the weeds of whether it's section I or B. It's the entire policy. It's my opinion, absent statutory, such as share committee requirements, that generally committees ought to have 7 members, and each member is appointed by each trustee without anybody else telling him or her yes or no. And that person, perhaps you can say they got to live in the district or whatever, but that person serves at that trustee's discretion. This presents, and for lack of a better word, a bully system where the majority, and you may be on the minority someday where there's 4-3. So if 4 members want Mr. Smith and 3 members want Ms. Jones, or want somebody that represents kind of a different point of view, the majority gets to stack the entire committee with whoever they want, and the minority people have no say-so whatsoever other than voicing their opinion and voting no. And this is exactly what we've already done. I've been to 6-1 vote on this a number of times. I just totally disagree with this policy from start to finish. Again, it ought to be, unless there's statutory or good reason otherwise, each one of you should be able to say, I want so-and-so, and that's the way it is, not staff narrowing it down to 1. And I will say in summary, I've looked at other agencies, and at least the other agencies list the final applicant, like 5 or 10 or however they do it, but normally they'll list the applicants, and at least then, it's still kind of the bully system of the majority votes, but at least then the other people get their day in court, so to speak, to be heard. There's not even a mechanism in here for the other people that are turned down that we even know who they were, that they can come and speak and say, wait, I think I'm better. It's not even in there. So from start to finish, I think it's a terrible policy.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Mayberry?
Thank you, Madam President. So this is an area that I don't necessarily disagree with some of the comments that have been made, and just maybe I as a newer trustee, as a freshman here still, we have roughly 14 boards, right?
Committees, public bodies.
Committees, and some of them do represent
Our
the
areas.
districts.
Like-
So
like-
I was going
like-
to say wards for a second, but I was struggling. The district. So to me, there always has seemed to be a little bit of a disconnect, and maybe it's just because I don't understand it. But as appointed or elected official, I would think that an elected official would be in a position to be able to, I'd like to appoint Diane Nicolette to serve on the zoning committee for District F. And maybe it hasn't been done that way in the past.
Some committees a few of our public bodies are like that. All of them are not.
Well, some of them are, right, a lot
said
of
few
them
of them-
aren't because they're
They're not by district.
Exactly, exactly. But those that are by district, like
Like zoning.
or share, I think shares by district. It does seem that there's a disconnect there, that a trustee representing that district doesn't really have a say. And I don't know how to reconcile that.
Okay.
So I don't necessarily disagree with some of the comments.
So you're saying we do that, Council?
We have a couple districts, or we have a couple public bodies where they are by district, and we do appoint, I can't remember what they are off the top of my head. I do want to,
Zoning committee.
I feel like the zoning is one of them.
Zoning's one.
Yeah, that's the only one I can think of,
Only one I
but
can
I'm not
think
even
of, too.
positive, so I just
I know
remember.
it's zoning.
The other thing to point out is, I think it's important to point this out. That is, with all due respect, if you look at paragraph A6 VI, at the board's discretion, the board may take action to ask the responsible office to forward its rankings of candidates for the board's consideration and deliberation of more than one applicant. We specifically put that in there so that the board could have that. And also, it's not as simple as just, hey, we like this person and we're going to put them on the committee. These people go through a fully vetted HR process. They must apply like it's a job. They are interviewed like it's a job, and then their name is forwarded. This is not a simple, I'm putting my buddy in because I run this committee. That's not what's going on at all. It's quite the opposite. It's exactly what Trustee Cottle and President Taylor wanted to prevent from happening. And if you look at VII, the board will take action to approve an applicant to serve on the public body. So it's all within your discretion. Simply that comes forward as the one person that HR decided they want. If you guys want to consider more than that, you're allowed to vote to consider more. It's a way to get people through the process. The presumption here is that the presumption in some of the debate today is that people want these positions. These positions are difficult to fill. We get a lot of open seats that people do not apply for, a lot. And so that's why we allow people to re-up for the position and things of that nature. So just, I think you have to have the real world context. And the only reason why I know about this is because I represent almost every public body in the district as the legal counsel, so I work with these office liaisons. And this is a real issue. We don't have people. And they're free. I mean, these are volunteers. So just want to point out those are that's the situation that we're in.
Thank you, Council. Dr. Nicolette?
Do you know, we do have a mechanism, although it's not in a policy, we do have a mechanism as trustees to be able to see what committees have openings and go ahead and ask friends and colleagues if they would be interested, and then move them in the direction of the way that they're vetted, how they apply, and earning that spot, much like we did sitting at this table through some hard work. And so I feel very comfortable, and I can say right now that there are several committees that I have colleagues who serve on them now that I kind of pushed them. Some asked me and said, should I do this? I want to get involved. And we talk about it, and it ends up being, oh my gosh, thank you for wanting to do this. and then some that I tap them on the shoulder and say, I think you'd be really good for this. Why don't you look into the application process? And I give them the information online. So we already do have a mechanism that I think is really, I'll call it pure. But we already do have a very strong voice. And to General Counsel's statement about filling spots, I think it's incumbent upon each of us to be aware of the committee openings and to move forward with colleagues and friends and whomever in the community to kind of give them a nudge and help them be able to at least look into it and maybe have a desire to serve. So I think we already have what we need.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. I'm going to comment, then I'll go back to you, Trustee Church. As I was just going through this again, because I kind of skimmed it because there weren't a whole lot of changes in it, so it made me kind of jump into this a little bit more. I think if we look at 4, Roman numeral 7, it's on page 4 towards the bottom. I'm bringing that out specifically because there's a couple of things I want to say. First of all, council is accurate in that it isn't easy to fill the spots. I've been on the board almost 8 years now, and there are always times when, hey, we're still looking for some people to fill this. Some of them we know are mandated by statute, such as SHARE, Capital Funding Protection Committee, but most of them are not, right? A couple have limitations for districts. Most of them are wide open. At least 10 of the 14 are wide open. And there are absolutely times when it's like we're trying to find people. And so part of the intention was, hey, if we have people that want to serve, let's give them an opportunity to continue to serve as long as they're in good standing, right? Thank you for moving that definition. Secondly, you mentioned, Trustee Church, one time you may be in the minority, and please take this in the spirit in which this is intended. I'm in the minority every day of my life. So there's nothing you can tell me about that I don't know. And I said little Roman numeral 7 is intended to speak to that. People with different viewpoints, races, yada, yada. And what we do is rely upon the staff to help weed through that. There is specifically someone that I encourage to be on the committee. Because there are times when committee openings, I try to remember to put it on my social media. People apply, and to get involved in the committee and so on, and didn't have a great experience, partially because his views were a little different, right? And as a consequence of that, is how we ended up with this. It's like, wait a minute, we want to make sure that we're looking specifically for people with different views, because we don't want people to have a bad experience because they have a different view, then they feel like they don't get a real chance. Nobody wants that. It's the difference. It's the diversity of views that help us land in a great place on these. So that was the intention of little Roman numeral 7 there, because I absolutely know what it's like to not have a voice. I absolutely know what it's like to be in the minority. I absolutely know what it's like when it doesn't seem like there's a place for me. And that was the intention beyond that. So I thank you, Council, for pulling out, hey, the board at any time can say, hey, we want you to bring those folks forward. Because if that's another level of involvement that the board wants to have, we should take advantage of that. And as a board, we can do that, right? And this brings it back to the forefront. Hey, we can do that. And ask, hey, send us this list. And then we can get a little bit more involved and go to another level. But I absolutely have to take issue that this is to silence or disregard the voice that is in the minority, because that's where I live, and that's where number 7 came. That's why number 7 came about. So that might help from a contextual standpoint. Trustee Church.
For the record, I think you meant number 8, not 7. And I do want to address that because there's a great legal question in there.
Is there? Yeah, it's tiny. It is.
Yeah, it is tiny.
Yes.
Well, let's get back to the bottom line, which everybody here, legal has just confirmed. The board can do it. The board, not me. So, and we're assuming that we can't get applicants. So, if we have an opening, and it just happened where it was like District A, my district, and the first thing I knew about it was when the agenda came out on Thursday morning, and I didn't know this person from anybody. And they're recommended to be the District A rep for whatever committee. And I had no say-so whatsoever in this. I had no prior knowledge, no nothing. And that's wrong. And I'm sorry, it's wrong. And what we're doing here is we still, by minority, meaning the minority membership of the trustees, regardless of your race, I'm part Jewish, Hispanic, whatever, Heinz 57, but the minority of the board is trumped by the majority of the board. And again, let's just pretend that I have an excellent candidate. It's an insult to suggest that one of us would do it as a friend.
Oh, that's just an example. I mean,
Okay,
it's-
but-
yeah,
but,
I don't think Dr. Nicolette meant.
It wasn't Dr. Nicolette.
Oh.
But at any rate.
Well, whomever.
At
Okay.
any rate,
Oh, okay.
I have an excellent candidate. He's a master's degree, former principal, and I want to appoint him or her to a committee, and the board can say no. It's taken 100% out of I've got an applicant, he can be vetted, or she, pass everything, but the board can still say, no, we don't want him or her, and I think that's wrong. Getting back to number 8, I think that's a great thing you brought up, and the only question I have on that, and this is for legal, I guess, I love the idea of recruiting. I taught recruiting and I taught diversity recruiting, and I love reaching out to the minority groups for that. But the technical term appoint, if we endeavor to appoint somebody based on their race, ethnicity, gender, are we being discriminatory to qualified candidates? So my question is, should we take out the word appoint? And I think that's for legal, but I'm not sure.
Let me take this. Okay. No, it says that you consider those things, but you don't appoint someone because of those things. That's very different. As a diversity recruiter, you understand that, right? When people are saying, "Hey, I want to hire somebody," you don't want to be out there. And I hope you aren't advising clients or used to advise clients, whatever. Let's go hire somebody and because we want to make sure we hire a black person. No, you want to make sure that these differences are a part of the consideration, because you're looking at what's going to add value to the work that's being done in that organization or on this committee. So this does not say we're going to go out there and find someone based upon these things, and we're going to pick someone because they're black, because they're a woman, because they're disabled, or whatever the case may be. This is saying you want to keep all those things in mind so that we get diverse views.
And again, it's what you're saying, I understand, and I agree. It's the wording here, endeavor to appoint. And that's what, I'm glad you brought it up, because I had it in my notes. Endeavor to recruit is wonderful. Endeavor to appoint, it just made me a little bit nervous that a person who, say, didn't fall into one of those categories, well, everybody's some kind of race or something.
Well,
but you know
everybody
what I'm
falls
saying.
into a geographic area because everybody lives somewhere.
Yeah, and so somebody might feel they were disenfranchised because of being essentially in the majority.
Well, do you have a legal concern around that? That's the question, bottom line. Is there a legal issue around that?
I have no legal concern around it. It doesn't say we're going to appoint because of this. What it says is we're going to try. We're going to try to balance all of these interests throughout the community. It's a reasonable. I'm comfortable with it. I can defend it.
All right, I've made my point, and I appreciate the decorum and the respectful listening. Thank you.
Anyway, go ahead, Dr. Nicolette.
I, Diane Nicolette, move that Board Policy Committee forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9100, Public Bodies, to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
There's a motion on the floor, and there is a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, there is. Oh, yes. Trustee Mayberry. Then we may have some public comment on this as well. Okay, Trustee Mayberry.
Yeah, thank you. No, I just looking at some of these committees, particularly that I can only find 1, 2, where there's trustees that where there's members of these committees that represent particular districts.
What is there other than zoning?
One zoning.
Is it naming?
This one looks like forgive me here, stay with me. The school naming committee, is that one?
Oh, I'm
district
just trying
as
to
well?
remember. I'm just trying to
Yeah,
remember.
It's trustee zone A, representative trustee zone B, so it's a little unclear to me.
Yeah, that's
still.
naming. I mean that's specific to trustees. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Zoning and naming are the only two that have trustee
Zoning and
appointment.
naming. Zoning and naming. Yeah.
All
And
the
that's-
others are either mandated or it's spelled out through the creation of the committee on
Okay.
how members are appointed.
Right.
All right, thank you, JJ. That's why I said of the 14, there's probably 10 that's wide open. So that was pretty close.
Yeah,
Because I know there are two
no,
by
it is. And
statute.
so
and
I
there's-
just
Yep.
speaking for myself, because I commented sort of the trepidation I had with respect to
Yeah.
those two committees. It looks like there's a process within those committees where trustees, the individual trustees do in fact appoint. So my concerns are satisfied.
Okay, yeah, certainly for those two. Mhm.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you.
Counsel?
And just to clear up the record on the issue that Trustee Church brought up, he is right that your District A was available for naming. And the HR process had gone through, and the appointment came, I believe, at your very first meeting, or your second meeting, was very earlier in your term. And you brought it up, and if you remember, I gave a legal opinion from the dais saying that the trustees get to appoint for naming, and so that person did not go forward. I don't know if you ever filled the position, that's up to you. But that just clarifies the record, because that's what actually happened. I remember that meeting, and I see JJ and Michelle, who's the liaison, nodding their head in affirmance. So the item didn't go forward without just to be clear.
Thank you, Counsel. Trustee Church?
While it's probably not worth beating the dead horse, I believe that policy still doesn't give me the ultimate authority.
No, because it still has to come here to the trustees. Right. And I will say this. I will say this on that. Thank you. I meant to bring that up and I forgot. This is just to talk a little bit more about how it's difficult to fill these positions oftentimes. I do remember that situation. It actually wasn't his first meeting. It was a little bit later than that when Trustee Church brought up that point. And you remember that. It's like, hey, and you weren't disrespectful to the person, and so then it was pulled. Yeah, it was pulled, and then staff reached out and asked you for nominees, and you had none. I remember that because staff came back to me and said, what should we do? Because we put and that's no indictment, but what they're saying is it's hard to do these because your point, it was made, you weren't involved in the process. Okay, you're right, and the board said, okay, let's pull that off, right? We won't vote on that to give that opportunity, and then nothing happened from there. And that's because it's not always easy for us to find people to fill those slots for the two that we have. And so we're talking about a lot more. So it's a bigger conversation around that. And so that, again, that's not as an indictment. That was something that happened, lived and breathed. You did get the support from that, but nothing happened from there because it's hard, right? Just because it's hard, Public comment?
No, Madam President, there is not, but I do have a question. Who was the second?
On that, it was a...
Joe. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
okay. All right. Thank you, America. Any other discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, we have the motion on the floor to approve. This is 9100, public bodies. All right, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition?
Okay.
Okay, let the record show the motion carries. The motion carries. Let the record show it is 5-1. Okay, we will move on and thank you, Mitch Batchelder, for the historical perspective, and Ms. Anderson for nodding when it was like, was that the case? And yes, it was. No, it wasn't. So thank you for that. That's helpful. Thank you, staff. On to agenda item 2.07. You guys, do we need a quick break? You want to push through? Let's push. Okay, so we better keep pushing. Okay, 2.07. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9050, governing model of the Board of Trustees, specifically to update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And this is back to our superintendent, Dr. Enfield.
Thank you, President Taylor. Yes, my first student advisory committee is today at 4,
figured,
so
I
I want to make
figured.
sure we get through this.
And they're back in person and stuff,
They
too,
are.
which is
They are
great.
coming here.
Yes.
So this one, as you said, is more cleanup. In talking with Neil, the sentence was removed referring to principles of operation. There, in going through, were not any other significant ones except for staff being replaced by employees. Neil, is that correct?
That's correct.
Man, wow.
Sorry.
So for-
Yes, Superintendent.
I don't know which makes me feel older.
I was off the mic when I said that.
All right. Let's see if we have any public comment on this.
There is no public comment.
Okay. Bring it here to the table. Any discussion on this? Go ahead, Trustee Church.
Of course.
That's okay. That's what the meetings
And I
are for.
apologize. I know you have a meeting at 4, but this is very important. This is extremely important. The governing model for the Board of Trustees. Trustees, generally elected or appointed, doesn't matter, are responsible to their constituents. They're responsible to the taxpayer, the community, the students, the parents, and very specifically, not just to the parents and students, but to the entire community. And I really am uncomfortable with the word shall being used where the trustees are, again, elected or appointed and have free speech rights that we don't want to impede. We've been down this road a little bit before, but we don't want to impede the free speech rights of individuals. And so the word shall makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
Where are you, Trustee Church, so we can go where you are?
Because of the free speech right of the trustee.
No, shall.
So right
Yeah.
right at the beginning. And well, let me back up here.
Okay.
The way I would like to see it phrased in a couple places is using the word as guidance, because it is guidance, but it's not shall. And let me, it's a good question on the shall, but and I hope I'm right on this. Yeah, I see it 11 different times in here. Oh, wait, am I in the wrong? This is governing model of the Board of Trustees, yeah. Balanced government.
Can you tell us where you are so we can
Yeah,
follow?
let me find it. Well, let me start right at the beginning and make it a little bit simpler.
Okay.
Where it talks about the definition one, let me try to find it. By engaging in the balanced governance model.
By engaging, I'm sorry, can you
Yeah,
just let me know where you're reading?
I apologize. There's so many different places in here. Balanced government model under number one reinforces the trustees' role of informed oversight by ensuring balance of government that discourages micromanagement while setting out constructive role for the trustees in informed oversight. I would like to see, and if I can kind of go through everything because it's probably going to be a non-issue, but while allowing elected or appointed trustees to advocate and vote as representatives of the people, as I just said it. I like clarification that it recognizes the rights of the trustees.
I'm sorry. So can you tell us what your I'm just trying to follow the recommendation. Help
Sure.
us, Trustee.
Well,
I think
under
everyone's looking and kind of frowning.
Sure.
We're trying.
Under
Help us.
balanced government, number one, definitions, at the very end, perhaps instead of period, a comma, while allowing elected or appointed trustees to advocate and vote as representatives of the people, period. And that's not a motion, but it's something I'd like to point out as discussion for the general concept of the entire policy. And then
Let me jump in if I may.
Sure.
I just because I'm
Sure.
I'm really trying hard.
Sure.
So help me. So what you're saying on this one specifically, but it's kind of seems like it's going to be a theme throughout. Is what I'm hearing.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So what you're saying, generally speaking, what you're saying is you want to say, yep, balanced governance is great, but the trustees should be able to do something else.
but we recognize their right to advocate for their people. Yes.
Okay,
This is guidance.
Okay, hang on.
Yes, ma'am.
So what you're saying is that you want balanced governance to not be our governance model, but just be a guidance for our governance model.
Well, it is a model, but I don't like the implication that it's mandatory if you disagree with something.
Okay, so pause right there. So that's your overall concept right there.
Yes.
Okay, so so let's why don't we have some conversation, because if depending upon where that goes might determine where the rest of this goes.
Right.
Okay, so really it comes down to from a trustee standpoint is is there a motion in that, Trustee Church, then that?
No, purely discussion.
So your discussion is should balanced governance be a model that we commit to, or should balanced governance just be a guideline? That's the question you want?
More or less, or somewhere in there to recognize the rights of the trustees to their free speech, as I kind of quoted before.
Okay, well, I don't know that this does not recognize free speech, so it looks, I don't think you have any takers on that one, Trustee Church.
No, I didn't expect any, but
Okay.
I want to put it on the record. And that's why, like, if you go down to number 3, governing style, the first sentence, the board shall govern lawfully with an emphasis on balanced government model. That's where I would have put in as guidance, comma, and strategic strategic, putting it on the right end. When you get down to the end of that, I think that's ones where you have the word. I think I might that I just think that there's that there should be something in there that kind of recognizes that we don't have to go lockstep if we disagree, if we want to voice our own opinion, et cetera. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Church. So there's no motion in here. No. Okay. Okay, so basically, for the record, you want there to be something that says, but the trustee has free speech.
Yes, as I said, recognizing, and the quote I used for the balanced government under number 1, while allowing elected or appointed trustees to advocate and vote as representatives of people.
Okay, all right. Trustee Rodriguez?
Yeah, I mean, I hear what my colleagues saying, and I do feel we, as an appointed trustee, I feel I speak my mind as I see fit and try to represent my district as fit. And our balanced governance is just that. This is the way we govern our school district, and I can only imagine how our legislators and our senators would be if, okay, I represent, but then I want to do whatever I want to do. I think it would be kind of chaotic. And the way I see this policy, I think it's fine. It's how we've been doing business, and yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez. Other comments? Dr. Nicolette?
Yes. I'm trying to understand, Trustee Church, what your real intent is, because there's several things in here that speak to me and guide me. And when I look at page 2, number 3 under governing style, the first thing that is really important to me is all of this other stuff aside is the board shall govern lawfully. And that, we know that's huge, that's broad and deep. And yet that is really what we are beholden to. And I will say for myself, there are those NRSs, NACs, federal law, all those things that govern us because they're law. And then in the very beginning where it says we're stewards, for me, the definition for me of the steward is that as District G, I represent every constituent in District G, and that is extremely important to me. Plus, I also represent, as I sit at this table, this dais, I represent everyone in Washoe County School District. I know that I'm at large, I'm District G, I was voted into that position, and yet when I get up in the morning, I represent every student, every employee, all citizens, and it's my job to listen to them. And I have to balance that with, as I referenced, page 2, number 3, governing style, is lawfully. And that sometimes is not always easy. The ultimate purpose for this, and I was fortunate enough to be serving those 9 months back in 2016 for District G when Dr. Ellsbury continued his work on this document. And it was definitely a deep dive and a lot of wonderful discussion that I wish at times we could replicate. There's not enough time, maybe not enough energy. But this is really to govern us so that we as professionals, that with integrity, with good intentions, aside from our own wishes and desires, are representing Washoe County School District. So really this is just a guide for us in how we govern ourselves as trustees.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Trustee Church, we got to get to, if you want to get to a motion,
very
okay?
briefly, and I agree. I'll give it an S for a B+. I think it's important for me to emphasize that we the rights of trustees.
Your mic's off.
To recognize the rights of trustees, but I give it. It's not a bad policy, and it's a great concept. in general. I just feel, I don't want to feel locked in that somebody is going to get injured because the feels that they and expressed a view that, oh, you didn't follow the board guidance. Is it legal to somebody? Yes, it's lawful. But again, my concern is that we recognize our individual to represent the community. But it's an A- for B+ policy. It's not one that I'm just like the last one where I'm just totally opposed. Thank you.
Okay, looking for, did I ask for public comment on this?
There is no public comment.
Okay. All right. So there's seeing no motion on the floor from church. You wanted to get on the record that concern. I'm looking for a motion for the approval of this policy, if that is the pleasure of the board. Policy 9050. Moved by Trustee Rodriguez. Is there a second? Second by Dr. Nicolette. Seeing no further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Opposition?
Nay.
Motion carries. That the record show us 4. Trustee Minetto had a school appointment. Yep. All right, we're going to go on to agenda item 2.07. And I'm going to push us a little bit. Is it? Oh, I mean, sorry, 2.08. Thank you. Push us a little bit. We have the students coming in here pretty soon. All right. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and or forward the revisions of Board Policy 9052, Communication Protocols for the Board of Trustees, especially the update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. This is for you, Dr. Enfield.
Yes, it is. The one, in speaking with Neil, the one change that we wanted to point out was an update under 5B to state that communications shall assist board in responding to constituent concerns instead of the superintendent's board services department. Neil, did I get that right?
Perfect. That's all it is.
Okay.
That was the new policy that you
Okay. Yep. That's the one that came through. Okay. Any public comment on this one?
No, Madam President, there is none.
Okay, thank you, America. Any discussion from the board? Okay, one change on here, so as from what it is. If not, then I'm looking for a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board, to approve policy 9052.
So moved.
Okay, motion from Dr. Nicolette. Is there a second?
Second.
Trustee Mayberry? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? The motion carries. That the record show that is unanimous 0 in this. 1.2, agenda item 2.09. Discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and for the proposed revisions of Board Policy 9115, meetings of the Board of Trustees, specifically the update formatting and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. And once again to you, Dr. Enfield.
Thank you, President Taylor. So those that I will point out to you is under Policy 1B. I believe, so this was a change that I put in there, and I believe it was a little bit semantic-y on my part, but I think it mattered. I think that the original language, Neil, and I'm not seeing it here, was to finalize district's values, mission, vision, and strategic goals by the last day. You're not constantly, I don't think, finalizing your mission, and you know what I mean, unless there's, but you are finalizing strategic priorities for the upcoming school year in alignment with the values and mission and strategic goals. So it was just a,
That makes sense.
yeah, that was, it's not a real, it's not a substantive change in terms of, you know, changing the intent.
But it does make sense.
Yeah, that was all. So
Any
I'll open it up for discussion.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Superintendent. Any public comment, America?
There is no public comment.
Okay. All right. Looking for any discussion from the board, if there is some. In any Trustee Church.
Just very, very, very briefly, I'll really try to be brief. There were a few minor things, but what we're doing here is we're forwarding it, as I understand it, for public review, and then it comes back to the board.
It goes to the board first.
Yeah.
And then if approved at that level of the board, then it goes out to public review, then it comes back to the board.
Yeah. So I'm ready to go ahead and approve it for that purpose, and the fact that it states out our missions and goals, which is basically to educate the kids. So, okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Trustee Church. Any other comments on this? Looking for a motion, if it's the pleasure of the board? Move to approve. Trustee Mayberry, is there a second? Second, Vice President Nicolette. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Opposition? The motion carries. That the record shows unanimous. As alluded to from Trustee Church, these policies as amended in most cases will be forwarded to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees for preliminary approval, and then we'll go out for public comment for 13 days, and we'll then come back to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for final consideration, and if approved, will become policy. All right, closing items. Any public comment?
There was one public comment submitted via email that JJ should have forwarded today from Mr. Joe Morabito.
Okay. All right. All right. Then our meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is on, our next meeting of the policy committee is on October 18th, right here at 2 p.m. Thank you, everybody.